Tell you what, helps if you come off mute, doesn't it? So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Post-Conference Presser for Anfield Index. We are just over 48 hours away, maybe under for when you're listening to it, from the Carabao Cup final, Sunday, the 16th of March, Wembley, 4:30 p.m. UK time. Liverpool will take on Newcastle in the final, the first domestic silverware of the campaign. And because it's two teams from the north, two teams with passionate fan bases, what do the shite bags at the FA do? They move it to half full. But that is another matter. We're going to go with a positive vibe on this one. And I'm Dave Davis, coming to you from a pretty sunny Edinburgh, truth be told. It's actually quite nice. And do you know what? Maybe it was in 2 hours' time. I might be doing it in T-shirt, but it's not quite there yet. Let's get into it, ladies and gents. You know how it works on Post-Conference Presser. We'll talk about the questions Arne Slot was asked, the answers that he gave. We'll talk about a bit of an injury update, which we got. Maybe we expected a little bit. We'll have to look back a little bit to the other night against PSG and think about the lessons we learned from this one. We'll talk about Newcastle, the threats they bring, and then we'll finish with lineup, score, and scorers. So let's get into the questions and the answers that Arne Slot gave. Quite a few things he was asked. Very fair questions. And I would never say, I want to phrase this carefully, Arne Slot was in a jovial mood, because he's not that type of manager, but you could tell he was focused and bullish is the term I would use. So we'll call out some of the key updates that we got from this press conference. So he was asked the question, it's probably understandable, about contracts, and the key line from it there, if you can see it on the screen, about Virgil and his comments in the mix zone specifically. He said, the only thing I know is that I want Virgil to be here next season. He did say a little bit more than that, and I'll give you a bit of a clip later on, but just in case there is any doubt whatsoever, Arne Slot is crystal clear. He wants, like all of us, Virgil van Dijk to be here next season. And there may be some alarm for those comments that Virgil van Dijk made in the mix. So me and Trev talked about it last night, but we just want it to happen. I don't really think there's much more that can be said, but I will play a short clip from that in a very small amount of time. Injury updates is what we got next. And maybe nothing too unexpected with this. As Arne Slot said, Trent is not available. He won't be there. He's still to be assessed, but we do expect him to be back before the end of the season. Did say Konate yesterday was recovery. I expect him to train with us today. He mentioned afterwards they did think that Konate was just cramp, and that was the expectation. They expect him to be back with them today. Don't underestimate just how big that news is. I think without Konate, you'd have been potentially looking at a back four in the final of Van Dijk and Robertson, no doubt, but probably Quansah at right back and Endo at centre-back. I think without Konate, that was what you'd be looking at. So if we're honest, I actually think that they will be quite happy in that dressing room. It stops Alexander Isak licking his lips too much. That is massive news. And Eddie and Greg will pick me up on this for swearing, but fuck it. We're winning it now, lads, with Konate there. That was the best news of the day by a mile so far for me. So well happy with that. And it is about trophies. So Arne Slot was asked about this, and he did say one of the reasons you get out of bed every morning and come here to train is because you want to win trophies. It's funny how people see this. Me and Trev even, giving him the wrong name, talked about it last night. He was one that the Carabao doesn't resonate with him, and everyone's entitled to their opinions and reasons for different scenarios. I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to Wembley. That's not bragging. I'm just bang up for it. It is a trophy. It's a chance to change that number from 10 to 11. I also get the perspective, which it seems to split, doesn't it? The fan base more than anything, that bigger fish to fry, a title to be won. And I can kind of understand that to some extent. I do get that, but really, really excited for this one. No two ways about it. And Red Armchair supporter thinking VVD will pocket. He's out. We'll talk about him a little bit because he is their big threat as well. No two ways about it. He was asked about the penalty and the other night and will he practice those because this one could go to extra time, could be pens again, couldn't it? And he said, these players do take their penalties on a regular basis. Darwin missed, but I don't want to make any more of it other than him missing a penalty. This isn't to be derogatory. Better players than Darwin Núñez will miss penalties and shootouts. It's happened before. It will happen again. It's just the lottery that is penalties. When I say lottery, though, you can influence it. And can you remember last season? I can't remember the company name, but before the penalty shootout, do you remember what I mean? Where Trent had all the mad wires on his head and they were doing all the psychoanalysis and the brain frequencies. And Klopp talked about penalty shootouts and practiced them and looking at all the aspects. I'm not saying it will come down to that for definite, but you just wonder if there is something in that. And before people start mocking this, 7 of the biggest clubs in Europe employed throwing coaches and people mocked at that. 2 years ago, and this is a start I did research on, 4 of the biggest clubs in Europe employed set-piece coaches and they were mocked in the industry widely by others. But everyone wants a set-piece coach now, doesn't it? So even things like penalties can be really valuable. So just keep that in mind this weekend. I like what he said about this. And maybe it's necessity. He was asked about Jarell Quansah and the chance he could start and how he's doing recently compared to being hauled off at half-time against Ipswich. Arne Slot said he has shown in his recent performances that he's outgrown being a talent. He's done really well. He has all the attributes to play fullback. Maybe there's a little necessity of needing to big up Jarell Quansah, possibly. Who knows? Because he will be right back, let's be honest, this weekend. And although he mentioned another name, so we'll come on to that in a clip as well. But the smart money says Jarell Quansah is going to be Liverpool's fullback this weekend. I like the fact he said he's outgrown being a talent because you feel like it's a chance for him to kick on despite the limited number of minutes under Arne Slot this weekend. And brilliant to see him get in the England squad. So great for him. Maybe that can give him a boost that way at the same time. But you hope he has a good game. One thing I do want to say, though, in Jarell Quansah is not defence or just a pure fact from the other night, Rafa style. I thought he did all right when he came on. He's never going to be Trent. You can't expect him to be Trent against PSG, but I actually think he did maybe more than all right when he came on. I think that possibly got lost amongst all the performances and the other talking points. So you hope he has a good game. And yeah, Red Armchair supporter there saying, even with Trent, Bradley and Gomez out, it's a good sign for us. We can still put out a player like Quansah in that position. Couldn't agree more. That's even almost bare bones at right back. That's a quality player. Talking about a player that Arne Slot may not hold in the same regard, I don't know, Federico Chiesa. And he was asked about this player. And he said, maybe it's telling, it's difficult because these players hardly train with the starters because of the way it works. The ones who play Saturday only do recovery Sunday, so there is hardly ever time for them to compete with each other. I agree that players who don't start, it's not an ideal world that we have so many games. That is true. Part of me wants to look at that and goes, yeah, I can make sense. The way they alternate on training, the way we're talking about Chiesa, and I can look and say things like, the mini pre-season that Arne Slot talked about, getting up to the speed of the Premier League, the intensity, I could bring that into the fore. My honest take on this is pretty simple. Arne Slot just doesn't fancy Federico Chiesa. This was an opportunistic signing as it was pitched to us. 10 million, possibly rising to 12.5, a player with a pedigree. He just doesn't fancy him. I don't think it is more complicated than that. He has been an unused substitute on the bench more than a dozen times now. Look at the facts on that. Unused. He's got a few minutes in the FA Cup against Championship teams or League Two teams, wasn't it, with Accrington Stanley. Gakpo, think about Gakpo in extra time. He literally couldn't hardly run or walk, could he? If he was a pet, Gakpo, the other night, you would call in a taxidermist, have him mounted, put on one of those shields with Thumper or Tiddles, from an old spinster to have it by the side. And still, even with that, Chiesa couldn't get on the field ahead of him. Now, I know that might have been possibly, as people will say, penalties and Gakpo was going to take one, but he wasn't in the top three, was he? Maybe we'll never know. But the fact that he can't even get on the pitch with that, I think it tells you everything. There's no need to read too much into this. For me, what Arne Slot is saying maybe betrays his two thoughts there, possibly. Who knows? But that is what it is. And this is why I want to bring it up, as we've also got those reports now. Expect Chiesa's exit. So I get the question being asked, but that's important. Now, let me play you the actual clip and what he said around the contracts. I think this is important to listen to.
First of all, Virgil said after Tuesday night that he still doesn't know what's happening next season. When do you need to know? When do you want to know what's happening with those three players and who's staying, who's going?
I don't know what's happening next season as well, in terms of results. But that's not what you mean. The only thing I know is that I want Virgil to be here next season, and all the rest is talks about contracts, and that's not what I do over here.
Is it impacting planning at all for next season?
Oh, interesting way of asking things. No, it doesn't. Not for me. No.
First of all,
there's not really much Arne Slot can say. We know the structure of everything works. Arne Slot is the head coach. He will be asked for his opinion, and he couldn't make it any clearer. He wants Virgil van Dijk to stay, like we all do. There's zero doubt about that. At the same time, as we also know, Julian Ward is now handling the contracts for the big three, Ibu and all those. Michael Edwards handles sales. That leaves Richard Hughes with the rest, I suppose you could say. However, I've seen a bit of a criticism of journalists asking this. What other forum are they supposed to ask it in? There's nowhere else they can check on contracts and ask that. And they also know, as Arne Slot has the right smile about, he's going to straight back these away. But it is completely right for them to ask. I mean, you can see there on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube or social media, me and Trev just find it's almost a bit of a circus, really, what's going on at the moment with contracts. So that is important to call out. And the right back situation, let me just play you the clip for this, because we talked about Quansah as though it's a given. Maybe Arne Slot's just playing mind games or a few rueful ones. Let's have a listen.
Looking ahead to this weekend, though, squad-wise, I'm guessing Trent probably out. Konate, though, is he fit? And therefore, at right back as well, is it a straight choice between Jarell? Maybe Endo could play with?
Yeah, I think maybe even Curtis can play there, but and you can also play with a left-footed defender on the right side, which is what Newcastle are doing at the moment, but then on the opposite. So Trent is indeed not available. He will not be there at the final, but he's still to be assessed for how long it's going to take, but we do expect him back in the end of the season.
I get what Arne Slot's saying there. There are options. I haven't really thought Curtis Jones could be an option. Let's be honest, though, for me, you just don't see it like me. There will be astonished. It will be a draw-dropping moment if Jarell Quansah isn't at right back. It's interesting, isn't it? And I know this is talking about Newcastle a bit, but as he alluded to, they've had Livramento cover over there or Kieran Trippier because Lewis Hall is out at the same time. Maybe that's a consideration for them. I wonder what Eddie Howe says. We'll have to wait till Sunday. Dan Burn possibly being shunted out there, but with Botman out, you expect him to be there. It's funny, isn't it? This is a final where both teams are coming into it with makeshift fullbacks. I think that is fair to say. But those were the real highlights, ladies and gents, from this one and this press conference, which makes us face back to Tuesday night. extra time, a penalties exit to PSG, a 1-0 defeat at Anfield makes it 1-1 to force the penalty shootout. And we always talk about what are the lessons that we take from this. And you want to be positive on this. For me, the man on the screen, Arne Slot, made a few errors on Tuesday night in terms of team selection at the start, in terms of the substitutes that he made and the way he set up. Didn't really, I think, took or learn too much, it showed from the first leg. Arne Slot has been sensational this season. Nothing short, nothing different at all. I hope, though, for me, he just learns a bit and he's better for the experience in those knockout legs and thinks a bit, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? That's the way it works for any manager. It is his first real crack at this level, having the taste of this. You have to remember that. I know people say, oh, Feyenoord don't want, but it's different with Liverpool, isn't it? So you've got to give him that chance to learn. I hope that's the big thing. The second thing is we probably won't find out straight away how much has extra time taken out of certain players. How will they be for Sunday? Especially because you talk about two, which is my other point. I thought Mac and Szoboszlai were sensational. Really brilliant on Tuesday night. And you're expecting, you're hoping they're fully ready for their final. Our midfield is better than theirs. I think Grav struggled recently. We've all said that. Doesn't take out to a genius to look at that. But those two especially, you are looking to win the midfield battle for us on the Sunday. So you hope they are absolutely fine. But yeah, the other thing I would say is you never know how it's going to go. But sometimes, as Mo Salah's come out and said today, sometimes a defeat like that can fire you up even more for Sunday. Not that you need motivation, but there is a bit of what can we learn? What can we take from it? Let's see what happens then. But yeah, let's not spend too much more looking at PSG. Because it's Newcastle on Sunday. Stuttering a little bit recently, people have said they did win their last game. Weird game, West Ham and Newcastle, almost like no team wanted it that Monday night. I think Newcastle were almost thinking about injuries, but they have lost 3 of their last 5. People will steer into, scored a few goals. It's funny when you look at them in the table. They're exactly level on points with Manchester City, 47. So they've still got that chance of qualifying for Champions League, especially as we expect it will be top 5, don't we? So they're right in the mix for a Champions League qualification slot. No two ways about it. You think that they do give goals away, 38. That is quite high, 11 higher than Liverpool, sorry. Scoring-wise, 47, it's okay. And when you think of the threats they bring as well, you're talking one man, aren't you? 19 goals, 5 assists. He's been on fire. I'm quite happy that Anthony Gordon is out because his pace could have troubled Quansah, particularly for me. So I have no issue with him being out at all. And I think the team is diminished by Lewis Hall being out. That's their first choice. Entire left side gone, isn't it? Doesn't mean it ends their threats, but that's a real positive for it. Harvey Barnes, by nature, he scored a few goals early doors, but pretty much all 5 of his were earlier in the season. So it's Isak that you're looking at. And before anyone says, and I know people say, oh, Virgil van Dijk, Canate, gets a goal against us normally, Isak, isn't it? Let's hope that trend changes quite quickly. They've got talent in midfield as well. Tonale, Bruno, that this is a good side who will be bang up for it. The threat on the other side, maybe, I'm interested to see if anyone agrees with this. Do you remember their last Carabao Cup final? We'll have a look at Understat a little bit, but their last Carabao Cup final was against United. And they froze a little bit on the big stage for me. It'll be interesting to see. You're not quite sure. What have they learned? What have they gleaned from that? Because it is quite a number of the same players as well. You should think the experience is with us. That could be a threat to them. But talking about Understat, they are they're slightly underperforming their XG. It's 48. They got 47 in that regard. They are in a positive way. They should only have 42 points and they've got 47. Newcastle do ship a lot of goals. And without Botman, without Lewis Hall, doesn't mean they've got no one there. You expect Burn will play. He got called up to the England squad, didn't it? Maybe Shah seems better at attacking than defending. So I'm not too sad if he plays as well. You'd fancy us to score in this one. And it's funny you say there, Red Armchair supporters, they have a few bruises in midfield. Joe Linton must have a dossier on the PGMOL where he's got, Anthony Taylor with a ball gag in his mouth or something, or illicit photos of Howard Webb, because the amount he gets away with in a game is just absolutely shocking, isn't it? So Andy Wales shouts him, put that poll out this morning. How many fouls do you reckon Joe Linton will get away with in this one? Big pitch. Fortunately, Michael Oliver can't referee this one. I'm happy with that. I watched Joe Linton the other night. I think he'll get away with 2 or 3 in this. So we just got to be prepared for that and expect that. But there are real threats from Newcastle still in this. There's no two ways about it. I'm just hoping maybe experience is part of our threat. They are lacking that big game intensity. Which brings us to the lineup for us, doesn't it? Who do I think will start this? I think some of it is really straightforward for us, and some of it isn't. Now, in terms of goalkeeper, there's a lot of reports that Kelleher will start this, isn't there, from the media? Wouldn't surprise me at all. I would hope Alisson, just because, it could go to extra time pens, but Kelleher has pedigree in this for pens as well. It's his competition. He did very well against Chelsea when he played in that final. So maybe it is him. The back, Van Dijk and Konate, we've got to expect that. We've got to expect Robbo, because again, just clearly doesn't fancy Tsimikas at all. And right back, I don't see how you see any different from Jarell Quansah. I honestly, he's the one that came on. He's a natural defender. It would allow Robbo to bomb on a bit more. Almost the 3 would shuffle across. So I get that. Kevin Inashi is saying there, I want to see Ali. I do as well. But I understand if there's already a deal been made, shall we say. That's part of the agreement that Kelleher will start this. And I know, Red Armchair, as you say, Alisson is in good form. I want him to start, but I'm not sure. Yeah, John P. Maybe in a way saying no more injuries, please. Strange to say, but the international break might not come at a bad time for us. I don't know. He didn't get asked, and we're not fully sure how far away Connor Bradley is. Joe Gomez, we know that seems to be a longer term one. But from what we were told originally, you'd hope, fingers crossed, that Connor Bradley could be available after the international break that way. So those are to clock. Midfield, I think McAllister and Szoboszlai has to start. Sensational the other night. It's a huge pitch. Ryan Gravenberch is going to start. He has looked tired. I don't think Curtis Jones helped himself too much the other night. I thought he was pretty average again. You wonder about him in extra time. He didn't help his case when you thought he could have really come on and controlled it. So I think it will be those 3. I wouldn't be against 4 midfielders in this one. I mean that. A big pitch trying to control it. I would not be against that, but I don't think that will be the case. It will be Mo Salah on the right. We don't need to debate that. Luis Diaz will start. Is it on the left or in the middle? I think the fact that Gakpo looked practically dead the other night means it's Diaz on the left. And in the middle, there's absolutely no one demanding the shirt, is there? Jota or Nunes, neither would surprise you. Neither you could say, honestly, as I'm thinking about it, who deserves to start. You could look and say, well, Nunes scored against Southampton, so it's his term in rotation. And maybe I'm wrong. I do think Nunes will start this one, mainly just to fuck with Eddie Howe's psyche a little bit, because they'll remember that 2-1 and the 10 men, and just literally, hopefully, someone breaks into his hotel in the middle of the night and just goes, just sort of taunts him a little bit. So I think it will be Darwin, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's Jota at all that starts this one. And to be honest, even as I'm saying that, Do I think Jota deserves it? Not really, but it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, Tony Steele staying there. Both Nunes and Jota have been very hit and miss. It's flip a coin for me. In fact, it's that flip a coin. If Gakpo was fit and we'd seen more on Tuesday, I think Diaz would move into the false nine. And again, that wouldn't surprise me. It's a shame at this stage of the season, no forward bar Mo is really putting the hands up, and Gakpo's injuries, you've got to give him that mitigation. Nothing would surprise me for this one. Which then brings us to the final bit of what's the score and the scorers. I hope it doesn't go to extra time, mainly because that makes it a nightmare to get back to Stansted, where I'm flying from as well, and get your plane in time. But I don't think it will. That is what my gut is honestly telling me. I am thinking a 2-1 Liverpool victory in normal time and Mo Salah to get the winner. Deserved for the player of the year. Deserved for the man who should win the Ballon d'Or. I don't give a damn what people are now saying about Rafinha, other things. Mo Salah, 2-1, normal time. Liverpool lift the Carabao. The maintenance men need to change and dig out their number 1. So it's 11 on the champions wall. And we are all celebrating on Sunday evening. That is honestly what I am going for. See if you agree. But there we are, ladies and gents. A Friday afternoon ahead of a Sunday with so much to look forward to. The first domestic silverware of the season. A chance to change the champions wall. Let's be bullish. Let's be excited. Let's look forward to it. But on Friday, the 14th of March, that was another post-conference presser